Welcome to today's lecture on entry strategy and strategic alliance. In this lecture, we will be discussing how an international business or any business would want to expand internationally and what are the possible opportunities or ways available to them for entering into an international market, where we would be discussing the different strategies to entry into the new market and also discuss the option of strategic alliance. Before entering into a new market, the firm must make certain decisions for expanding, and there are different questions that they need to answer. So, they first of all must decide about which market to enter, that is, in which country or in which geographical region they are supposed to expand their business. That is based on the opportunities available in the different markets and the choice of those markets based on different factors, which we will be discussing in the next slides. Second, they have to answer that whether they want to enter into a market for a longer period of time or their intentions to stay in that particular market is for exploiting any specific short-term opportunity. So this decision of entering into any market is particularly dependent on the long run profit potential, and they seek to go for such markets where they can earn some profit. This is based on the favorable markets are potentially stable. So when the specific markets which are giving them high profit, that is an indication of the stability, and they would prefer to go for a free market systems and have a relatively low inflation rates and have a low private sector debt as well. So these are some of the components which are related to the competition, that is related to the market segment, the political systems, and the economical system, and also related to the social factors which we have already discussed in our course before the midterm. Second, they are going for less desirable markets are those which are politically unstable and those who are based on the command economies or are governed through a mixed economic system and have excessive level of borrowing. So if you look into these components, we are going to expand into an international market, or we are going to enter into a new market based on the socio-economic and geopolitical system of that country, and if those factors are favorable, then that market is relatively important and easy to enter with a lot of opportunities. Once the government or political system, economic system, and social systems are favorable for the market or favorable for the businesses to expand, then we have to go for another consideration where we have to consider the time of entry. That is a must thing. The reason for it is that you should be in a position to exploit and gain maximum number of profits, maximum number of market share, and maximum number of customers should be grabbed. If these are not the potential options, then that is a less favorable market to enter. So majority of the firms, or those firms which are well renowned multinational firms, giant elephants, they prefer to go and enter into such markets where they can get an first mover advantage. So that is very important. Some of your competitors, if they are already in the market, international firms I'm referring to, and they are already having the first mover advantage, then that can create a disadvantage for you people. Then the second component that you need to understand is the scale of market entry. On what grounds are you entering basically into that market, whether your entry is just as a license or as a franchise, or you are going for an FDI or just as an exporter to that country, then in every situation there is a different approach used. So that has to be very carefully drawn and understood before entering into the market. Then you have to, based on the above components, now we would come to the decision whether we should go for the exporting, licensing, or franchising, or whether we should go for the joint ventures, or whether we should go for the establishing a wholly new subsidiary, or we can opt for acquiring and merger and acquisition, which we already discussed in the previous lecture. So these are the components for which we have to do all our work, all our planning, assessment before we enter into a new market. So just a quick overview, how can a firm enter into those markets? So basically, we already discussed those in detail in the previous lecture, but just a summary and just a review of it, how these points and these options can be exploited. The most easiest one is exporting. That's the common first step for many manufacturing firms. First, they export the product, they create the demand for your product, and then later on, looking at the feedback and response regarding your product, at the later stage they decide to go for the other entries choices they have, and they go for it. So later the firms may switch to the another modes. The next one is a trunky project, where we discussed that the contractor handles every detail of the project for a foreign client, including the trainings of the operating personnel. Now, at that point, when the project is completed and it is now available for startup, and it is in a position that they can just come and start their operations over there, the keys by that contractor is handed over to the management, and they start running the operations to the full extent. So maybe when you got the better results in exporting, now you go for the trunky project and start your manufacturing plant and unit over there. That is of course particularly dependent on the nature and ease of doing business in that particular country. Along with that, depends upon the availability of the factor of production and the natural resources which would be utilized in the product manufacturing. Third one we discussed previously was licensing. Now, like in licensing, what we do, we grant the rights of intangible property to a licensor for a specific time period, and in return, we receive the royalty fee. Now, they will be using patents, they will be using the inventions, formulas, processes, designs, and copyrights, trademarks, etc. However, some of the companies, they do not prefer to go for the licensing because it may bring negative impact towards the organization or your firm, and it may destroy the goodwill or brand image. So they may opt for a franchising, which is the fourth available option for entering into a foreign market. Now, in franchising, a specialized form of licensing in which the franchisor not only sell intangible property to the franchisee but also insists that the franchisee agree to abide all the rules and regulations, follow all the standard operating procedures, follow all the way of doing business, and make sure that they maintain the standard that is set already by that particular firm in the different countries. So that is used mainly by the services firms. So a firm who intends to go into a foreign market, and they have this option as well. Now, the two more options will be discussed in the next slide. That is joint venture. Joint venture is one of the more progressing and becoming more available option for the businesses to expand internationally. In joint venturing with a host country firm, a firm that jointly owned by two or more otherwise independent firms. Most of the joint ventures are based on the 50-50 partnership, but it is not necessary. It can be 40-60, 70-30, and so on. But you can go for a joint venture option as well. That is that you start involving yourself with a local firm and exploit the opportunities in that particular market. Now, lastly, you can go for the wholly owned subsidiary where you own 100% of the stocks. That is, that you acquire a firm or you go for the merger and you can opt for it. It is also one of an interesting way or option available for any firm to enter into a foreign market. However, it requires a lot of cumbersome efforts and also a lot of finances is required in this regard. So these are the six options you can choose. Depends on the nature of your business, the financial position of the of your firm, and how much you are interested in that particular market. So it totally depends on those factors, and also by the external factors, we can choose or go for different options. This slide present and we discuss the different advantages and disadvantages of the entry modes of different options that are available for a firm to enter into a foreign market, importing, exporting, trunky contracts or trunky projects, licensing, franchising, joint ventures, and wholly owned subsidiaries, or in other words, we can call it merger and acquisition. Now, every single type or mode of entry has their own advantages and disadvantages, a sort of a self-explanatory component. Another component that is very important or that influence your entry mode is your core competencies, your competitive advantages, and so on. So it particularly depends on how you look at yourself and your market before entering. You have to look at what your core competencies are, what are the things or points that put you apart and gives you an advantage over your competitor. So the optimal entry mode depends on the nature of the firm's core competencies. Your core competencies can be anything, depends on your factors of production, your processes, your operations, your resources, and so on. You have to identify, because these are the strengths on which you are playing to achieve and get advantage of the opportunities available. Now, when the competitive advantage is based on proprietary technological know-how, that means that when something is very sensitive in nature, something that your competitive advantage is based on your technological advancement, or it is your processes which are high tech and artificially intelligent, based on the latest technology, and you are in a fear that if you go for some of the options that are the licensing and joint venture or franchises, there is a chance that you will lose your this competitive advantage which is based on the technology. Then in that case you have to avoid licensing and joint ventures unless the technological advantage is only transitory or can be established as the dominant design. Now, when competitive advantage is based on management know-how, that means that when your management and your people are your key competencies, or the way you operate and function your business, that gives you a competitive advantage. In such situations, the risk of losing control over your management skills is not high, and the benefits from getting greater use of brand name is significant. So in this situation you may opt for a different strategy that you have to keep in mind. So we discussed two components of your core competencies and advantages. One is based on your processes and the other one is based on your people. Another point to consider while you are deciding on your entry mode is based on your cost. Definitely, the cost is one of the core component on which can highly influence your decisions of entering into another market, and somehow, somewhere, you may have to sacrifice or give up because your financial position or the cost of going for that specific entry mode is not allowing you, or it is not favorable enough. So when the pressure for cost reduction is high, firms are likely to pursue some combination of exporting and wholly owned subsidiaries that will allow the firm to achieve location and scale economies and retain some control over the product manufacturing and distribution. Similarly, the firms pursuing global standardization or transactional strategies prefer wholly owned subsidiaries. In a case where you do not want to go or increase your cost, because when you go for the franchising or you go for the trunky projects or you go for the FDI and so on, that is a way too costly process and you want to reduce your cost. So for that, maybe you and also want to control your production manufacturing standards. So for that, it is better to opt for the exporting. Otherwise, there is another option available, which is your wholly owned subsidiaries. You can opt for it. In between licensing and franchising, trunky projects may be a costly component, so you can avoid going for those components. In some situations, a firm may get confused whether they should go for the greenfield or they should opt for acquisition. Now, we already know that the greenfield are those where the firm starts from the scratch and they establish their new units from the ground zero and enter into the market. Then they compete, start and create a market, expand their business, and so on. While acquisition, we already know that already established firms are being acquired by the giants in the uh, international market, and they have this position because they do not want to go or waste their time. So the choice depends on the situations of confronting the firm. A greenfield strategy is, as we discussed, to build a subsidiary from the ground up. A greenfield venture may be better when the firm needs to transfer organizationally embedded competencies, skills, routines, and culture that is based on their core competencies or competitive advantages. So if the firm do not want to compromise on those components and they want to establish their own self with their mark, and they want to go with their competitive and core values and enter into a new market, then they will opt for the greenfield option. Now, over here, we will discuss the acquisition strategies where we acquire the existing company. So acquisition may be better when there are well-established competitors or global competitors interested in expanding. So we need to enter quickly into the market, and by entering quickly into the market, the best solution is to acquire the firm which is already established in that new market where you are trying to expand. So the volume of cross-border acquisition has been kept on rising just because that the firms wants to gain competitive advantage and they want to establish their network and their system, and they do not want to give this opportunity to other firms to enter and get into the acquisition with some locally firm, just because that my firm is actually trying to go for a greenfield which will take time to establish that new unit and expand and start operating and then competing into the market. So acquisition is a quick way, although this is having a cost. Maybe that cost is sometimes more than the greenfield, or by preparing and constructing, developing your own unit. However, because time factor is very important in decision making and entering into a new market, so this may be a better option to go for the acquisition. Now, if that is not the case, Then we have another option, which is strategic alliances. Strategic alliances refers to the corporate agreement between potential or actual competitors. It ranges from formal joint ventures to short-term contractual agreements, and the number of strategic alliances has been increasing over the past, and we have discussed and seen different strategic alliances with different firms in the previous discussion as well. This is particularly to get advantage of one firm's strength and utilizing it for your own particular purpose. So there are different firms who wants to expand their business, but they do not have those opportunities. So what they can do is, or they do is, they go for the strategic alliances. This way, through the help of strategic alliances, they get to achieve their common business goals, because both the companies or more companies who wants to expand their business and they want to get specific advantage from the specific opportunity, they go for strategic alliances with the help of which they share their strengths and resources. However, the parties involved in the strategic alliances remain independent in their operations or doing their business. It is a common for companies to come together to work for a mutually beneficial project. Now, the agreements of working together is referred to as an strategic alliance. Companies involved in a strategic alliance share their resources for the same purpose, and it is a popular, that is why it is a popular way of doing business in the modern business world. This is happening because of the globalization, rapid change in technology, etc. So as a result of which the business environment have become more complex and competitive. We have seen over the years there are different firms getting together in the form of a strategic alliances so that they can create opportunities and they can achieve a common goal. Strategic alliances are attractive because of different factors. It facilitates entry into a foreign market, it allows a firm to share the fixed cost and risk of developing new projects, products, and processes. It brings together complementary skills and assist that neither partner could easily develop on its own, because one firm has its own unique skills, unique opportunities, and competitive advantages, and the other firm is having their own strengths and skills. So, when combined together, they can create a very good business model for success in that particular new market. It helps a firm to establish technological standards for the industry that will benefit the firm. But the firm needs to be careful not to give away more than it receives. So, most of the time, these opportunities or strategic alliances are in a form of the projects where both firms share their benefits and resources as well as their expenses on 50-50. In order to successfully function and implement the alliance between two or more firms, it is very important to choose your partner firm very carefully, because a good partner firm can help the firm achieve its strategic goals and has the capabilities the firm lacks, and that is values. Got it. Now, the reason is that I will only go for a strategic alliance with another firm just because their strengths are actually overcoming my weaknesses. And by combining the other firm's strengths with mine, we both will become or be able to overcome our weaknesses and exploit the given opportunity. Now, a good partner shares the firm's vision for the purpose of the alliance. Now, it is very important that the core values of the firms are appreciated and acknowledged by both the partner firms. Reason is that when you do not share your vision with your partner or alliance firm, then there would be a differences in your approaches and this will not work out. And a good partner will not exploit the alliance for its own ends, because they will work for a common goal for the achievement and fulfillment of the common objective. So they will not work for their self benefits, rather they will opt for the mutual benefits. In order to make that strategic alliance work and to make sure that it is a successful marriage of two firms for a specific purpose, for that you have to make explicit decisions and make it clear to both firms. First, that this strategic alliance should make it difficult to transfer technology not meant to be transferred. That means everybody should be working for that specific project and not they should not eye on your resources or your independent technology or your competitive advantage component. So they should not be greedy and they should not steal it, rather they should work on specific purpose that we discussed in the previous slides, that it is very important that they should work on a common goal. This going into that specific strategic alliance is not for the sake of that you want to get an opportunity to get your hands on the others technology and way of doing business. That because we discussed in the previous slides as well that strategic alliances is a sort of agreement where you work on only one project at a time, whereas your rest of the organizations are totally isolated and they are different from each other. So we have to accept it and acknowledge it. Second, the alliance should have control with the help of a particular contract where the partners should not exploit the opportunities only for themselves, and it should be for the mutual components. Now this contract or legal binding should be there, that there is this when the strategic alliance or this project is over, then nobody will enter into that market or that specific sector to exploit and get business out of it. So you have to safeguard each other, because there is always risk associated that your partner may exploit or maybe you get greedy and exploit it. Third, allow for skills and technology swaps with equitable gains. You will only share your resources with your partner firm when they are also sharing their resources and their technology with you, and it should be on equal basis. Now when there is no equality and one firm is gaining more from the other one, this means that one is winning and the other is on the losing end. And in the beginning we already stated this thing that mostly strategic alliances are based on 50-50. So 50-50 in all respects. Lastly, the alliance should minimize the risk of opportunism by an alliance partner. Now, risk of opportunism, that means that there should be a clause, particular agreements that nobody should kick out the other firm at any point of time. And if that is necessary, that can only be possible by giving up or completion of the target or completion of the project. Third, it is very important the manner in which strategic alliance is managed, because how you are going to make it work, maybe sometimes if it is not clearly stated or written in the contract, where you have not written proper terms and conditions or standard operating procedures, it is very important that everybody should take their role and it is clearly and explicitly written, so that if something is not done, the other party should not blame the other one without knowing it. So it requires interpersonal relationship between the managers. The managers from both the firms must make sure that they have explicitly divided their roles and responsibilities and they are working and they understand the task in hand. Culturally, sensitivity is important. Sometimes this strategic alliance is between the foreign firm and the local firm, where there may be a possibility or opportunity chance of getting into a cultural clash or conflicts based on the differences in the culture, that is the local culture or the organizational culture. So we have to be open to ensure the workforce diversity. Differences of opinions are always there, but we have to find out a way where we can make it workable. Then learning from the alliance partner, it is a very good opportunity for the human resource, for the people of your organization to learn from the foreign firm, and also the foreign firm has the opportunity to learn from the local firm. So we have to keep your mind open to make sure that you learn. The knowledge must then be diffused through the organization, and whatever you have learned once the project is done, that learning will never end, and the knowledge that you have gained, you have to utilize, and you should utilize it for your mutual benefits and for the improvement of your organization. So this week we discussed the different options available for the entry into the international market. Different modes were discussed. We discussed what is necessary, what work or paperwork is necessary before entering into a market. And then the first option that we discussed is a strategic alliance. Next week, we will discuss the exporting, importing, and counter trade option available and how that entry mode can be exploited. Along with that, we will move forward towards the different arrangements that are in the operations on a global basis, how they are different and how they can be used and understood for the betterment of your business, and in order to give you an overview and also prepare you for entering into an international business. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, please do ask, and see until then, bye bye.